story begins when I was 21 years of age, going to UT Arlington in Arlington, Texas. And I was taking a class offered by Dr. King, which was a required business course in philosophy, in which he alluded to the existence of God by John Locke as being such that, as if John Locke said God exists because he is perfect, which I took up at 21 years of age, 35 years ago. So the story gets a lot more interesting. Came to faith by hearing by the word of the Lord, and it was a long and bumpy ride since then. So things came along and so forth. In 99, the springtime, at the end of the reign of the Antichrist, I was killed in a hotel room in Tijuana, Mexico, and brought back to life. This caused a big uproar and increased my responsibility for what was going on in the world quite a bit out of the attention I had gotten. So I took up a cause of challenging the supremacist groups of every race and other theory system basis. Well, this turns out to be fighting weapons of mass destruction and psychological warfare, which I indeed, took as a great challenge, and it resulted in and process of cooperation wherein one can increase human intelligence about 100-fold. Hypnosis, think tanking, research, investigation, experiment, debate, recycling, multi-paralleling, evolving, self-replicating, self-funding, live-in, centers of theory, comparison, and development. No one else has even believed. The arts became sciences. About almost 6 years ago, I had signboards in New York City and Times Square attesting to my discovery in advanced research practice. And since then, I've visited many other major cities, or large cities: Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, Denver, Colorado Springs, and other cities. But carrying my message about the research and about God's existence and the provability of the truth to headlines. The God of Christ, of course. So it's been a long time, but the truth being relatively provable. Enhanced hypnosis, increasing download rates under hypnosis, eye movements, hand movements, foot movements, and speech, multi-function software, specialized peripherals, as much as bioelectric or brainwave inflection to maximize download rates under hypnosis. Enhanced debate to hundreds or thousands of persons simultaneously. Think-tanking to hundreds or thousands of persons simultaneously. Yes. Specialized filtering with hip labs and so forth to return to attention what is best for group direction in a massive think-tanking, and otherwise, through uncanny anticipation, prepare them with what other background evidence to help them contribute to the line of pursuit. So anyway, enhancing all these processes, getting rid of the worst in research, biased personnel and or dependency on biased people and so forth in the research personnel, dependence on biased funding, self-funding, and live-in to basically isolate them adequately towards independent determination, independent of the supremacist groups of every race and other theory system basis. Not reasonably legitimately intended, not therefore supreme as coveting. So, over time, I discovered a lot of things: informational, behavioral, symbiotic superviruses, hiding in religion and around race, gender, other differences, national supremacy, etc., if not reasonably legitimately intended, not supreme, as coveting as a centerpiece of human validity, being the ethical issue of reasonable and legitimate intention. Yes, upon which one bases, their most important decisions in life as they reflect on others. The basic good versus evil, his values, plural, versus super self-value and so forth, overshadowing of all other values, and commonly in groupings for maximum efficiency for self in this. The so-called love groups turn out to be hate groups and are religious, national, gender, and other, of course, racial and other associations as well. As a group, they can be much more efficient. Well, they come down through time. False religion, nationalism, which is exotic and harmful, and the weakness I find is the disprovability, as a reasonable disprovability of their claims. And so through more advanced process, one can, and otherwise also through the utilization of hypnosis, which produces the uninhibited version from them, they're for sale to go under hypnosis on film and destroy their groups, leaders, and or causes credibility for money. So, have been promoting for, since 2007, alternate means of dealing with, instead of just treating the symptoms of weapons of mass destruction and inappropriate value appreciation and complex systems which evolved around it, to basically, instead of treating the symptoms, to basically treat the cause, which is false and misleading and or false and misleading theories. So basically, the easy disprovability, one must define provability and so forth, but, is it reasonable probability, is it should be relatively easily done, differentiating in probability, relative evidential certainty, relative evidential probability, as inconclusive as not reasonably probable, and reasonable evidential improbabilities that are easily defined. Utilizing logic, we can easily differentiate improbabilities and the extended set of fallacies: denied pertinent dissimilarity per comparison, denied pertinent similarity per comparison, appeal to sympathy, appeal to guilt, appeal to fear, taken up by actors to control other people's opinion upon the use of circular, non-circular, logical, non-logical, and combination systems of subject control have been employed by many groups. And the armies of the world that were gathered together for the Battle of Armageddon crawl upon their bellies, which is social foodstuffs and the sociocentric model and so forth in psychology. This would be obvious after a while and so forth. You don't have to take my word for it. One of my favorite sayings, and you don't collect, catalog, and compare the evidence at state of the art, and you'll see what the truth is of it. So anyway, Sethco was a product of a combined effort, duplicate city and centers of epistemological and metaphysical studies, which came together in 2007 to produce Sethco Centers of Theory, Comparison, and Development. No one else has even believed the arts became sciences. And some of my latest work involves attempting to produce a an early research prototype, 001, which in fact only cost $100,000, involves 100 homeless people, choice and select of the area homeless in some area, some city with adequate numbers of homeless. 1 in 5 can probably contribute. It is not very stressful work. And converting cargo containers into shelving units, putting a shelf on the bottom and a shelf in the middle, cutting the side out of them, putting them under a cheap party tent roof, and adding porta showers and porta potties, all can be done for about $100,000 if one is careful enough with their resource in it, and could have an early prototype, generate films and so on and so forth that are saleable, utilize dry erase magic marker boards, dry erase boards. I think they call them melamine boards. Very inexpensive, and magic markers that write on them, the preferred variety, and have them post and so forth for their think tanking. Nothing sophisticated like television monitors for each of them, which reflect their inputs to the group and so forth. But even a low tax unit like that probably is capable of producing and significant contribution towards the overall project and multi-purposing education, care and concern for the homeless, and involving them in the most advanced research practice in known world history, which probably will improve their circumstance socially and otherwise potentially as contributing figures in our society. So after having worked on this for 21 years since 1999, I have achieved a significant number of concept advances and so forth to aid us in fighting weapons of mass destruction and psychological warfare, informational, behavioral, symbiotic superviruses. Without the excuses, the behavior has nothing. And without the behavior, the excuses have nothing. Without a large group dependent on the excuses for the employment of psychology versus logic in it, and so forth. The utilization and dependence upon psychology to promote their excuses in the supremacist groups of every race and other theory system basis versus logic and elimination of bias and unnecessary ignorance are primary goals at Seth Code. The amount of resource involved, $1,000 per person for 100 persons, who also more immediately can begin producing things like video that people will take an interest in to better understand some of the very most important subjects in their lives today, whether they're dealing with perpetual harassment or for other reasons, unnecessary and unreasonably imposed social discomforts and so forth from people who are dependent upon lies and distortions to wrongfully acquire, influence with others and status in our society today. So basically, fighting against weapons of mass destruction and psychological warfare, targeting the youth through suspension of informed decision making and character development work, which will aid them instead of the supremacists. The youth anymore are being used virtually as toilet paper by supremacist groups of every race and other theory system basis. Supremacist groups exist wherein, not exclusive in large groupings and are harmful. Yes, and they have integrated behavioral mechanics to support the theory system after expressing adequately behaviors based upon the non-reasonably promoting theory systems. Their dependence causes them to become entangled and have emotional ups and downs depending on how well their theories are doing at the moment, defending their past behavior. So it has become as if integrated through the integration of evidences which are in fact dependent on the excuses in their theory systems to defend. In the sociological and sociocentric system, completely easily understood, just emotional ups and downs, though largely, you might say, contingent upon assumption of their future prosperity in society after exhibiting so many negative traits and having so many specific incidents that they get depressed. But otherwise, if you don't stop the justification, it will spread to the youth, and so will the behavior. Using the youth as toilet paper, without a future, they then have a past rushing at them in a compound arrangement that fewer people in that day will be subscribing and supporting the excuses, and also anticipation of a tomorrow where they can no longer adequately carry themselves with the excuses for their misconducts and otherwise weak and inappropriate behaviors. Seeing that coming is going to basically slow them down. Yeah, so without a future, their past comes rushing forward, have been using the youth to pad themselves, teaching them justifications for wrongdoing against others, claiming support from history, heredity, psychology, religion, economics, ethics, epistemology, metaphysics, and other theory areas, claiming justification for wrongdoing through false and or misleading appraisal of these different discipline areas. So the theory is that they're dependent on psychology and that their victims are in fact dependent on logic to not look as if they are in fact the problem, or that their rights actually are much lower in the victims than they would be at baseline neutral due to appraisal systems which are vulnerable to more advanced means in research, including, enhanced hypnosis, enhanced think tanking, research, investigation, experiment as they apply, enhanced debate, recycling to step one and seeing what they've learned, self-diagnosing of discrepancy in multi-paralleling and revolving personnel. They can parameterize what they are capable of doing through multi-paralleling and ask 10 different Seth codes the same question, get the same answer, or they go into diagnostics mode to see whether it was in fact the same set of evidence or credible means of its appraisal as they do know it to be, resulting in findings which were contradictory between Seth codes or otherwise as inadequately filled in and so forth in detailing or extension. So they have the ability to parameterize their capability through multi-paralleling, as well as in complex tasking breakdown, and in such cases self-funding, to use multi-paralleling for parallel processing for reassembly of final product in complex tasking. Yes, much more advanced, the most advanced research practice in known world history is apparently being ignored predominantly by the modern world, even though it is far more effective, reasonably far more effective than any other general type of research practice we have going on in the world. And not only was the research good for dealing with the supremacist groups, as supremacist proofing it made it in fact so strong, it became and more universal dominant. The best we are able to do in research in the modern world is standardized and strengthy as rod of iron. I also call it iron rod, Seth code. Yeah, so God exists because he is perfect by sound logic and mechanics. Wouldn't be perfect if he didn't exist. In being perfect, having of existence. Perfect viability, perfect ability, by definition, necessarily, God does exist. Have measured perfection and found it lacking existence? Relying upon the great vacuum, the great nothing otherwise, which is nothing, has nothing, does nothing, causes nothing, can exert no mechanical energy, is in fact inert by extended definition. Claiming that this has somehow done it, that from absolute zero you get intense heat, and from absolute nothing you get intense material presence, and so forth. Ridiculous. Vacuums do not pull, material pushes is a childish mistake in physics, provable. Ask physicists under hypnosis. Do vacuums really pull, or does not just material push? And in this pressurized material environment that we know little else than, can carry a lot of people with it and so forth. If one starts playing games with like the twin hemispheres that the draft horses can't pull apart, but that is merely air pressure on the spheres, material pushes. That's all it is. And asking physicists under hypnosis if they think the great nothing spontaneously does something at absolute zero temperature, necessary for any movement whatsoever. And yet but that's only a material issue, worse off than absolute zero, moved or something. There was no material for any movement whatsoever, was merely the absence of material, is a childish mistake in calculation. Attempting to explain around perfection's existence, absolute ultimate perfection exists by definition, being more perfect having of existence than merely conceptual, and that it was in fact my concern over accuracy in a wide variety of areas, as they may lead to inversions in fruit and so forth, and the dynamics which one must employ to bear fruit can involve a lot of different areas and disciplines. And fear of perfect justice led to clearing up my premise and so forth to my conclusions, and I was able to see clearly we are able to make it much more clear to many more people through applying ourselves in a cooperation which produces additive intelligence between people, minusing of cancellation and scattering in groups like corporate boards and so forth. You can have one human intelligence from a corporate board. You can have less than one human intelligence at their age, or through cooperations you can have a multiplier of a single human intelligence, which we claim to be worth billions to us, and yet at the same time do not apply ourselves to cooperations which are capable of producing the highest levels of effective intelligence to accuracy. People living, and due to what fact factors and so forth in an internalized and projected delusion in what I call behavioral intelligence, which was caused by over self-evaluation until it seemed at that point reasonable extensions include virtual make-believe in any area subject to change upon assumption of change in circumstance at the slightest whim, may change fixed theory areas repeatedly in one day, assuming that they have a changed circumstance, and that the theories that they're telling themselves and projecting to others will actually benefit them going a different way. That the behavioral intelligence was a problem of all history and so forth. Their internalized and projected delusions are in fact dangerous. Ask 10 different people the same questions, get 10 different sets of answers, get 7 separate culls from those 10 people of the general population or populations of the world. They are in fact dangerous. As much as 100% of all value in existence, as things are seen valuable to them and themselves combined, all there is of value, and nothing which does not have a value to them or is them has any rights whatsoever out of their ridiculous fundamental failure to appreciate extrapersonal values as they reasonably exist in an obvious interaction reality. This is easily provable. And why psychology didn't come along and so forth and discover it, as it would be so clear at a certain level of research and difficult to deny. I don't know, but here we are. So applying ourselves to proving what is and is not true to resolve the disputes between the different groups is paramount. It is as much as the end or obsoleting of war, that unreasonable interests are always responsible, one way or another, for war. They are either unreasonably resisting the insistence of other or another, or otherwise unreasonably demanding of another or other causes war, will send youth to their death. There is only one most logical place where a border belongs under circumstance that involves history and modern features, and we don't even go to the research and the uninhibited version and the total recall of hypnosis to attempt to determine where the border belongs logically, but we'll send troops to die. Youth will go and die because of this. But whoever is being unreasonable would probably not impress their groups to further influence at such an horrific breach and violation of other people's rights and welfare, which the rest of their countrymen also face a sentence from, and not that because they also are behavioral intelligence, does it mean that the people in influence as such are not a threat to them also? Even other people who are behavioral intelligence are threatened by more powerful and influential people with behavioral intelligence, because their decision making will in fact commonly affect them adversely, or as much cost their lives, welfare tremendously, or otherwise. So they're not actually a closely knit team in the supremacist groups. The supremacist groups were largely arranged at conflict of interest of the general welfare of nations and the United States of America, exploiting conflict of interest between groups in here, but not furthermore exploiting a conflict of interest or taking advantage of a conflict of interest between group members within a supremacist group, and much less between supremacist groups in the United States. Black, white, brown, yellow, red. We've got them. Religious-based supremacy, extra United States national supremacies, and we haven't yet taken advantage of a conflict of interest or otherwise utilized a conflict of interest to break down and dissolve the ruse that supremacists project to the subjugation of other people within a target group or area. So if we did apply ourselves to taking advantage of the circumstance of conflict of interest, $50,000 for 4 hours work on a Saturday out of a supremacist group member, ask as you will and ask as you may, under hypnosis on film, would do severe damage compared to the minimum cost of the enterprise, and probably would take out half the secrecy of supremacists in the United States of America. Half of it. And they are, in fact, secrecy dependent. So why we don't move forward, or why we haven't moved